Apologies for that. We've got some technical issue where my laptop doesn't want to find the internet. So, right, agenda item 1. We have the appointment of chair for the Housing Overview Scrutiny meeting on the 11th of September. I don't know the process for appointing a chair, apart from the idea that I submitted that I would like to be chair. So if the committee is happy and content with that, then we can just proceed, unless anyone else would like to challenge.
Agreed.
Brilliant, good, thank you, nice and easy. Right, next is the minutes from the previous meeting. If anyone has any issues with the minutes, if not, I will sign them in a bit. Next, apologies for absence. We have apologies from Councillor Pesh and Councillor Bristow, and Councillor Johnson, who's been subbed by Councillor Whitelow. Thank you very much. And that's it. Declarations of interest. Just on my point, declaration of interest, one of the issues coming up. I did once work for Dens, so I'll declare an interest now on that reason. Anyone else with a declaration of interest? No? Brilliant. Okay, next. Public participation, I'm not aware of any, so move on to the next. Consideration of any matters referred to calling, none. Action points from the previous meeting. Have everybody hopefully looked at the action points? Any comments coming from it? No. We've got the work programme. And then the first one on the report then is housing performance and tenants' voice report deep dive. So we're doing the deep dive first, is that correct? Who am I looking to? Good. Okay, right. So I understand this is a first for us as a committee. So if whichever officer is leading with it, if you'd like to introduce yourself and kick off, we'll take it from there.
So I'll leave Ryan as interim head of housing operations to introduce himself and the team. I guess as you highlight, Chair, this is the first deep dive scrutiny item that came from the scrutiny survey that was issued to residents and members some months ago. So there was an ask to provide an encompassing overview of the end-to-end housing operations process, specifically highlighting aspects around how individuals come to occupy a council home, how we manage those homes, and how we deal with issues around things like antisocial behaviour or other tenancy breaches. So rather than revert to the typical report style that you would have for this meeting, we've got a number of officers representing the service who are going to provide a more engaging overview for you into the aspects of the service. So I'm going to hand over to Ryan.
I think Natasha's actually said pretty much everything I was going to say there. But yeah, we thought that this would be a genuinely a good opportunity to bring in officers that are doing this job on the ground, that can talk you through a tenant's journey, as it were, from the point that housing register application is completed all the way through to them becoming a tenant and what support is in place for them thereafter. We will touch lightly on antisocial behaviour, but there is a separate deep dive item for that, and there perhaps will be follow-up items with regards to specific support teams like tenancy sustainment, for example. But I'll hand over to the officers who will talk you through the journey of our customers. If we could leave questions to the end, because it might be that the questions are answered throughout the presentation, but do feel free to come in after. And there's some myth busting as well, which you read out into the slides. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi everyone, I'm Emma and I'm one of the Housing and Needs officers for Decorum.
And I'm Charlotte and I work alongside Emma in Housing Needs.
So we're going to take you through some information today. We're going to start with the Housing Act Part 6, which covers the permanent allocation of housing, which obviously is a statutory service that we provide through the Decorum Borough Council Housing Register. The Localism Act 2011 allows us as the local authority to set certain criteria, such as local connection, the point structure, bedroom standards, and how we meet our own housing demands within the borough. The allocations policy or housing allocations policy is then made up of both of these, and this is what we will then use to determine who is or isn't eligible for social housing. And it's also the guide that we use to assess applications and then award points depending on that household's housing need. It's this policy that we then use to make sure that social housing goes to those who qualify and are eligible and have a housing need.
So with that in mind, when an applicant wishes to be on the housing register, they obviously apply online. And the first thing we look for is whether or not they actually have a housing need. Because if they don't have anything we can point them with, then they wouldn't have anything to bid with. So one of the main things we look at is whether they have local connection to Dacorum. So we've got there's like 3 criteria for that. So one is a 10-year residency for themselves. That could be any time in their lifetime. There is also family connection, which is an immediate family member, has to be like living in the borough now and has done for 10 continuous years. And also employment. So if they have been employed in the borough for the last 2 years on a 16 hours or more a week contract. So that's kind of the biggie when we are looking to assess applications. We obviously check for like finances as well. So we have savings and income thresholds. So savings, for example, is £16,000 if you are under 60, and then £400,000 if you're over 60. And obviously the income thresholds that we're looking at vary depending on the bedroom size. And in total, I think we usually do over 2,000 applications a year for the housing register. So that's kind of the criteria. We obviously have, set criteria that we look at to determine the points. But then we also have applicants that sometimes fall outside of the policy. So what we have is something called a complex case panel. We call them CCPs, which basically means when somebody applies, maybe doesn't meet our criteria, but actually we think they would be eligible for the register if they needed like welfare points, or if they should be exempt from local connection, or things like that. So we had an example recently where somebody had applied to us. They were actually active already, but they've had some horrible news that actually they've got a terminal illness and they want their family to move closer to the family support within Dacorum. So we managed to write this report, and then they've got 50 additional welfare points, which will hopefully secure them a 4-bedroom property, because at the moment you do need around 100 points for a 4-bedroom. Alongside, that's kind of one of the things we do. We also have management points. So that is where maybe an applicant has like serious disrepair in their property, but the private sector team, we will work with them on that, and then they confirm whether or not we can award points, and the same with the antisocial behaviour team. We can also do medical assessments, which I feel are very well known within Dacorum. That is run separately, so although you do need a housing register application, you can apply for medical points separately. What we're assessing though is why their property is affecting their needs. So not necessarily a diagnosis. So, we get a lot of applicants that say, my child's got ADHD, can I have an extra bedroom? But actually what we're looking for is, okay, that's the diagnosis, but why is the property affecting that child? The best way I always think to look at it when we're assessing is an easy example is if somebody is living on the top floor flat of a property and they have like multiple stairs to get there, and then they have an injury where they have it affects their mobility. We would then look at that and think, okay, yeah, that's permanent. We would probably look to award medical. If that same person applied but was on the bottom floor where they didn't have any stairs, actually, is their property affecting their needs? Probably not. So we wouldn't look to award medical in that sense. And the final thing kind of on this slide is with visits. So we also have the opportunity to visit some of our applicants that apply. We can do that unannounced, or obviously we can arrange that with them if we feel we need to, know a bit more about their needs.
Okay, so there are 2 ways in which somebody can receive an offer of a property. We have the choice-based lettings, and then we also have our direct offers. The choice-based letting system is what's known as the Moving with Dacorum website. So once somebody's active on the housing register, they can log in. That's where they would go to update their application, make any changes, and that's where they will go to look at what properties are being advertised. They then have the choice of what to bid on. So out of 4 properties being advertised, only 2 may meet their needs, and they will then make a bid for those properties. The direct offers, so we have 3 direct offer lists altogether. We have the homeless direct offer list, so that's where households who have had their main duty accepted. So they would have been through the homeless journey to reach that point. we then make an offer directly to them when a property becomes available. We've also got our home seeker and transfer direct offer list. So households that are added to there is they may not be able to bid online like other households. So it could be a situation where the main applicant is in a situation where there is domestic abuse. Perhaps they can't log in freely and bid on properties. So to take sort of the onus from them, we would place them on the direct offer list, minimise that contact. We contact them when we have a suitable property. The third direct offer list is for households that need major adaptations. So they would have had their medical assessed by us, they would have been assessed by occupational therapists, and they would have been added to our list. So when we are matching them to a property, we are looking for those specific adaptations that we can match them to. Just ending on that is that we'll come on to myths a bit later, but one of the common ones that we have is I think some people feel that being placed on a direct offer list is often a quicker way to being housed, and actually it's definitely not. We want people to have the freedom of bidding, so being on a direct offer list is not necessarily a quicker way to be housed.
So with preventing homelessness, we work very closely with the homeless prevention team. So the housing register is a great tool to help prevent homelessness, because although obviously they run a separate investigation, you can actually apply to the register as well, as long as you meet our criteria. So you can, do both together. And obviously we have got the temporary accommodation within our decorum housing stock as well.
Okay. And then sustainable communities through lettings plans. So we do put local lettings plans together for new developments. We did have a couple of new developments recently, the Paradise and St Margaret's Way, where we had local lettings plans in place. And we've also got 2 new developments coming up, which you probably already know all about, is Eastwick Row and the Kingside development. So we will have, when we get to the point of advertising those, we will have local lettings plans put together. What that does is helps us to ensure that the communities are sustainable and that they contain an appropriate mix of households. So we aim for 33% of transfers, 33% homeless and 33% home seeker. The local lettings plan will also try and help us manage known ASB hotspots a bit better.
So the final bit is our allocation process. So we actually do the adverts as well as the register. So what that means is obviously when we've got a void property, we can advertise that, and then once it's closed, obviously it will either be direct offered or it will go out to advert to people to bid on. It will generate a shortlist. So we usually look at the top few applicants, and then we would ask for ID documents, bank statements, pay slips, things like that, just to basically verify their situation and make sure, again, they still meet, our policy criteria. It's then signed off by a lead officer, at which case we can offer the applicant, hopefully, and then it moves on to the lettings department. So they actually then take that over, and then they will sort out handing out keys, etc. Just for information, we usually do around 700 allocations per year. And obviously that does include housing association properties as well. So we do advertise their social housing as well as decorums.
And then nearly the last slide from us. This just gives some figures, which is quite interesting. So it's from April to end of June this year. And what it will show you is the number of bids we have on the different property types. So you can quite clearly see that decorum-owned properties are more popular than housing association. They get more bids than housing association properties. It also highlights that houses are more popular than flats. And it's worth pointing out here that we do have households on the register that have already been identified as having a very high housing need. And what we are finding is that they are bidding on houses, but not necessarily bidding on flats. That would also perhaps resolve their housing situation. So that's what we find.
And then just on average, really, in terms of the bidding for adverts, it's usually around 40 to 50 points for a 1-bedroom flat. You would probably need about 50 to 60 points for a 2-bed house, around 30 to 40 points for a 2-bed flat. And then 3-bedroom houses, you would need at least 70 points, and 4 beds over 100. So that's basically housing needs in a nutshell. We do quite a lot in this team, but I'm going to hand over to Leanne now, and then we'll come back and do some of the common myth busting.
Hello, I'm Leanne, Tenancy Management Lead Officer. The beginning of our tenancy journey starts with the signing of the tenancy agreement, which is the legal document that outlines what we expect from our tenants and what they can expect from us. They also get their sign-up packs, which include information on rent, repairs, what to do in cases of emergencies, along with links to our tenants' handbook, which is the practical guide for our tenants. It's written in plain language and it summarises key parts of the tenancy agreement and policies. And our tenancy management policy explains how we apply and interpret the tenancy agreement in practice as the landlord. Plus, it also provides our staff with a consistent framework for decision making. Everything there is underpinned by the Housing Act, which essentially dictates all of our decision making when it comes to managing tenancies. We start off, as soon as somebody becomes one of our tenants, we contact them within the first week to book in a new tenant visit, and that is carried out within the first 6 weeks of them starting their tenancy. It introduces our named tenancy management officer to them to start the tenant and landlord relationship. The tenancy management officer will explain their role, check the tenant settling in well, and then also reinforces the tenant's responsibilities so that everything's clear and transparent to them. Plus, it equips our tenants with the tools they need to maintain successful tenancy with us. Introductory tenancies are reviewed at around the 8-month mark, ready to make sure that we can move them onto a secure tenancy at the 12-month mark. This happens if there's no breaches of the agreement. If there are any breaches of their agreement, it typically revolves around levels of ASB or rent arrears where they're not engaging with our rent officers and the support that we're offering them. We can extend their introductory tenancy up to 6 months additionally. Tenancy reviews do carry on after people have a secure tenancy with us. It gives us a really good opportunity to make sure that they are meeting the terms of their tenancy agreement, along with confirming the details of their household to make sure if anything has changed, we've got that on our systems. It also gives us a really good opportunity to assess the condition of the property to make sure that the stock's being well looked after, any repairs are being reported, and we can refer them to support services if needed. We want our properties to be well maintained because, one, it helps our tenants' well-being, plus it helps reduce void costs when a property becomes void for any works that are required. Core tenancy management activities. As a service, we carry out over 30 tenancy management functions. Within them, there's typically quite a few more additional things that we work on because every case can be complex, but it includes changes to tenancies, which includes assignments, sold to joint and joint to sold tenancies, name changes, mutual exchanges, help to move payments when people are downsizing, and right to buy visits. And maintaining properties and enforcing our tenancy standards includes abandoned properties or suspected abandoned properties, access issues for gas and electricity, checks, alterations of property where no permission has been sought, along with condition of garden and condition of home, decants if there's any major repairs that are needed, along with fires, floods. Hoarding when our tenants haven't been engaging with our hoarding process, along with the support that we offer alongside our tenancy sustainment teams if any enforcement action is needed or if there's repeated issues of hoarding. Neighbourhood inspections I'll talk a little bit about a bit more in a minute. Subletting and if tenants are in prison. Also permissions for lodgers, pets and running a business. Support and safeguarding, ASB, we deal with low-level ASB, including labour disputes and nuisance. As you can imagine, that includes a lot of subcategories too. Domestic abuse and safeguarding with our tenants, including referring safeguarding services for adults and children, and then everything to do with ending a tenancy, bringing keys in, terminating tenancy if somebody goes into residential care or are moving away, deaths, successions of a joint tenancy, and ones where there's no statutory succession available to them. We work with a lot of teams, as you can imagine, as tenancy management officers, we are often the central point for any tenancy related issues. But for us to be successful, we do work super close with our internal teams and external agencies. We work with community safety on high level ASB cases and anything to do with criminality. This also helps us to support our tenants that are suffering from issues around this. Tenancy sustainment, when there is hoarding on the clutter scale of a level 5 and above, then we can refer them over to our tenancy sustainment team for that additional support, with the hope that the clutter scale level will reduce and they can come back to work with us. Housing needs, we collaborate on decants, any welfare issues with our tenants that are looking to move, and therefore transfers and succession linked housing transfers. Our property services includes working with our repair team, surveyors, compliance teams around access issues and any unauthorised alterations. Housing income, we have a shared approach there, meet regularly about tenants that have high levels of arrears. Housing cleaning teams follow up with us with fly tipping, bin store misuse and shared estate responsibilities. External teams include mediation services, interpretation services. We have multiple disciplinary team meetings with child services, mental health workers, medical professionals, social workers, domestic abuse services, essentially anyone that our tenants are engaging with, that they've got any form of support with, we can work with them as well. So it's more of a person-centred approach with anything that we're working with. Some key projects and achievements that we've been working on. We've created the condition of garden process, which is a new procedure which includes templates and a flowchart for our tenancy management officers to follow, which has improved consistency across garden-related casework. Similar with condition of properties, where there's denied access for internal repairs, we've created a structured process. And then we've also aligned our actions with tenancy conditions and safeguarding practice between relevant repairs teams for when they were coming up against safeguarding issues. Neighbourhood inspections. The tenancy standard from the social housing regulator places an emphasis on community standards, meaning landlords must work with tenants to keep neighbourhoods safe, clean and well managed through actions like inspections and estate walkabouts and tackling antisocial behaviour. So therefore we brought this into the team a couple of years ago. We carry out neighbourhood inspections monthly over 112 defined areas. We RAG rate them depending on how many reports we needed to make on the areas, red being a lot of reports, but we complete these the majority of the time, and from in June, as an example this year, our amber rated areas reduced with no red rated areas for the first time. It's just showing that us doing these consistently is really paying off. With issues being reported and rectified quickly by the relevant teams, it means that there's less repetition of issues like fly tipping and messy bin areas, and it turns our neighbourhoods into better, cleaner and safer areas for everybody to live and be proud of. We've worked with links with housing needs to have a decant working group to best utilise our stock for decants and less hotels, which is more cost effective, efficient for the council. And we've been working with our environmental protection team and ASB teams on noise related ASB. We've introduced the noise app to help us with that. And our biggest project to date is what we're currently working on, which is the tenancy agreement review. A formal consultation with our tenants launched last Monday. Hopefully you've all heard of it all already and have been telling your constituents about it. You'll see a lovely video pop up in a second with my face explaining the changes. Cringe.
Hi, I'm Leanne.
Tenants feedback.
Management.
And you've got a glimpse of my voice too. And once we've gathered all of our tenants' feedback over the next couple of months, then we will be able to incorporate all of their engagement into the agreement, which will be rolled out in April next year. So be prepared, you're going to see my face now.
Management lead officer. And I'm here to tell you about something we've been working on that's important. Something that affects you, our tenants. Tenancy agreement that we use to manage your tenancy is due for a review.
Sorry, we've practiced this, but it's not wanting to work. You like doing it when it's not closing.
That's really good.
View. Your tenancy agreement is the legal document that outlines what you can expect from us and what we expect from you. So it is important it's updated. In this short video, we'll be sharing with you the changes we're proposing and how you can influence them. We're updating the tenancy agreement to make sure it follows the latest laws, is easier to read and helps us manage your tenancy better. The last review was in 2012, and since then things like laws, policies and services have changed, and we want to make sure the agreement reflects that and also protects you. We're not starting from scratch, but we are making some useful improvements. Fewer clauses. The agreement has been shortened from 99 to 72 clauses by merging overlapping content, improving the structure and simplifying the language. This makes the agreement clearer and easier to understand. 6 new clauses to reflect current operational needs and legal requirements. These are: periodic visits for tenancy reviews, introduces routine visits to help us manage your tenancy and check the condition of your home. Pests and vermin, explains your responsibilities for preventing and reporting pest problems. Complaints, explains the formal complaints process and how you can escalate concerns, including to the Housing Ombudsman. Contacting you, clarifies how the council will communicate with you by post and electronically. Notices, confirms how legal notices will be served. Entire agreement, confirms that this agreement is the full legal contract between you and the council. General wording updates throughout. All the other clauses have been updated to improve clarity, define responsibilities, align with the latest laws and council policies, improve legal clarity without changing your rights or responsibilities. Starting 1st of September, we're inviting all tenants to have their say on the changes we have proposed and put forward any ideas that you would like to be considered. Here's how you can get involved. You can complete a survey online, via phone or in person with a member of our team, or you can ask us to visit your home. If you've got questions, we're here to help. You can check out our FAQs on the website or contact us directly. We can also provide large print or easy read formats, translations if English isn't your first language, or in-person help. Once consultation ends, we'll carefully review all your feedback, and after final changes will be sent to Council Cabinet for approval. We will let you know the changes that have been made based on the feedback that's been received. Then you'll receive formal notice before the agreement takes effect. We'll also launch the new Tenants Handbook alongside it, so everything's clear and easy to follow. We're committed to making this agreement work for everyone, now and in the future, so don't miss your chance to have your say. Visit our website or contact us to get started.
Wait for the next slide.
So we're just going to finish up with just some of the most common myths that we come across. You probably have your own to add to this. So the first one we have is children who are not a permanent part of the household should be entitled to a bedroom. So this is a difficult one because as we know, there are lots of households that don't have children, or they're split households that go between more than one property. Because of the limited stock that we have, if a child has a principal bedroom in a home, they are not then automatically eligible for a bedroom within a social housing property. So that is a false common housing myth.
The next one we did touch on earlier. So I have a medical condition, therefore I'm automatically entitled to additional points. As obviously spoken earlier, that isn't true either. We do need more information, and we need to be able to establish that the property is affecting the medical need and actually would be improved by alternative accommodation.
Another myth is that the council has a lot of empty properties sitting vacant. There could be a number of reasons why that is. Sometimes there's some void works that are taking place that potentially might be a bit longer than normal. We'd always encourage residents to let us know if they are concerned that somewhere is abandoned or empty. We can let them know and reassure them what's happening with it in the background. The other option is from a tenancy point of view, if somebody has abandoned their property, we can then action it from our side.
So the next one is, I'm expecting a baby, so I'm eligible for an additional bedroom right away. Unfortunately, again, not true. So we accept a child as a member of the household when the baby is born. So baby is born, we ask for a copy of the birth certificate and for that child to be added onto their application. We would then reassess their whole situation and see if they are eligible and what their housing need is at that point.
So I think the next one is more historic. So the housing register is a list that I can join where I will eventually be offered a property. I feel like a lot of people do think that it is a list and that everyone will be housed, unfortunately, as much as we would love that. We haven't got enough properties and it isn't really a list, as we've kind of explained. You know, we've got the point system, and even though the direct offer is called a list, it is still not done in a list format because it does depend on people's needs or preferences as well.
Sorry, so that was Leanne. We changed order, last moment change. So decorum supported housing properties are like care homes. We get this a lot from people that are maybe considering a supported housing option but are put off by the fact that it could be similar to a care home. It's not true. We do encourage people to maybe go out and visit them if they can. You will have, if you're considering supported housing, it's your own flat, so it's independent living. You have your own front door essentially, but it will either be in a scheme or a dispersed property with just a supported housing officer and possibly a lifeline in the property, but they are not care homes.
We just move people when there's a problem. It's easier for us to action the problem rather than, hang on, did I read that correctly? We would rather tackle the issue than move people, because essentially if we move people, we'd be moving other people into it and they'd be experiencing the same problem. So our main focus is to tackle what the issue is, whether it's to do with ASP, etc. As a last resort, we will consider management moves if we have exhausted every other avenue. And the final one is, I'm a joint tenant but can have a sole tenancy now my partner's moved out. Joint tenancies are a legal agreement and that both tenants have legal obligations. So anything around this would need to go through court. We would always advise people to get independent legal advice if they are considering moving from a joint to a sole tenancy. There is the common myth that if people remove themselves off of council tax or housing benefit, and then they won't be a tenant, but legally they are still a tenant because they've signed the agreement. And that's the end of it.
That concludes the presentation. Thank you all for listening, and thank you to the officers for presenting that item. I think it can be difficult, and being the first one to do the deep dive is to understand exactly the amount of information to put in there, so we didn't want to bombard you with too much. Hopefully we've given you a thorough overview of all the different things that are involved in tenancy management and housing allocations. But yeah, if there's any questions, now's your chance to put them forward to either myself or the officers that deal with the cases.
I think also just to highlight, you've obviously got a report in your pack which appends a number of key documents that are worth referencing, and hopefully you've had the opportunity to review that. As Ryan says, the first deep dive that members will receive this evening, and we'd really welcome your feedback to help us curate these deep dives in the future. So we're keen to ensure that they're meaningful and meet your needs. I think the other point that I would like to highlight is we have pre-scheduled member development sessions throughout the year. So if there are key areas that members feel they would value more information or specific detailed briefing and engagement activity on, we're able to curate bespoke sessions around key aspects of the service to benefit yourselves. So open to questions, and thank you very much, team.
Thank you, Ro. Before I take questions, first of all, well done, Leanne, on being extremely professional, something that most people would run away from doing. So don't be embarrassed about it. That was very good. camera,
Thank
so well
you.
done. Okay, open to questions. I did see your hand, Ruth. Do you want to go first, Rick?
Okay, thanks. Thanks to the officers and the whole team for the presentation, all the work behind it. Very useful and deep dive. Now, I'm going to apologise to you and to everybody else in the room, because whilst it sickens me to ask this question, it's just for the purpose of those that may be sort of watching the meeting or the recording back to us. So could the most opt person confirm how the allocations policy interacts with both asylum seeker properties and any of the foreign resettlement properties, or possibly whether there's any interaction of those schemes at all? I'm guessing it's Natasha.
As the regional resettlement lead, probably most appropriate that it's me. Thank you, Councillor, for the question. It doesn't, in short, in initial instance. So if households are occupying asylum resettlement accommodation, such as contingency hotels or other accommodation-based asylum support accommodation pending an asylum claim, they're not entitled to access social housing and to join our housing register at that point. The reason being is they don't have recourse to public funds and therefore not eligible to access social housing, nor access other public funds such as welfare benefits, etc., and don't have the right to work, such as you or I. When that changes and when there starts to be an interaction is after determination of refugee status. So if the household has progressed through the asylum process, and there's some seven-year wait with some 12 to 13,000 applications pending, so it takes some time. They then have the ability to seek access subject to a positive decision to rights to work and to other benefits, including onward applications for housing. At that point, that interaction and that interrelation starts, but they do need to qualify for housing in the same right as all other applicants. And so applicants who are not in priority need will be assessed in the same way as any other applicants that officers have just outlined. So typically single individuals with no vulnerability would be given advice, assistance and support to access accommodation in the private sector or to access other support services such as hostels and night shelters, as would any other single homeless household. Where there are other, differentiations from that is where there are specific resettlement programmes that members may be familiar with. So I guess the best and most relevant example would be the Syrian Vulnerable Resettlement Scheme, which you may be familiar. This organisation has participated in, and we have some 10 households who have been resettled via that scheme, and that has been from the back of a formal cabinet decision agreeing our participation. And so in that instance, properties are identified and are allocated specifically ring-fenced to that scheme, but outside of the allocations process. So hopefully that answers your questions. But there is no single route for asylum seeking and new refugee households to circumvent and jump the housing register. That there is an expectation that they will meet the allocations policy. An aspect that would be worth highlighting at this point, as I suspect a question may come up for those kind of focused on key aspects that are relevant around the criteria that officers mentioned. The 10-year residency connection is an aspect of our policy criteria that sets us aside from all other local authorities in Hertfordshire and most likely in the region. It far exceeds most local connection criteria. Typically, local connection criteria for residents see us fall in line with the Homelessness Code of Guidance, and that guidance suggests a local connection requirement of 6 out of the last 12 months or 3 out of the last 5 years. Decorum has a strong local connection criteria because it wants to ensure that its accommodation is retained for local residents, understandably so, and ensure that homes are prioritised for Decorum residents. But what that does mean is that we may need to use the exceptions criteria if we have a homeless household who meets the Homelessness Code of Guidance criteria but doesn't meet the allocations policy criteria, in which case officers would need to assess that on a case-by-case basis and present recommendations to management for approval.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. That's very helpful.
Okay, any other hands? Ed?
Yes, so you just touched on there that the 10-year residency sets apart the borough to other councils in the area, and also my understanding of it is that lots of nearby councils don't have their own council housing function in-house, right? It's all done via housing associations. Cool. So how do you envisage the local government reorganisation affecting the service that you deliver? I'm sure there's probably not a clear answer, but just what's the scoping looking like and how's that going to fit in?
So there are 4 stock retaining authorities in Hertfordshire, us being one, St Albans Council, Wen, Hatfield, and Stevenage Borough Council. We have a stakeholder relationship group with those stockholder authorities to ensure that we can identify common practices, useful engagement activities to benchmark key policy decisions with them. And as we lead into LGR, that forum will be a useful opportunity to identify key policies where we might need to look at achieving some consistent approaches to lead us into LGR. But those are in the very, very early stages of decision making. Those 4 stockholder authorities typically have local connection criteria that sees them align with the homelessness local connection criteria, and it's very likely that in the coming months and years, as we seek to review our housing allocations policy, which is due to take place this year, that we will make presentations to the portfolio holder and to this committee to see us align our approach more consistently with that of other local authorities. But that is still very much in the early benchmarking and review stage, and something to come back to this committee.
I've just got a question. Thanks, Jen. I've got a question just around when you originally talked about there was a third of each group was allocated to like new builds, things like that. How do you deal with a situation where you get a particular flat block that then has an antisocial behaviour issue? How do you kind of deal with that? And I think it's not necessarily whether it's DBC, but whether you've got housing association scenarios as well. I know we've got some new builds that have gone in the town, and instantly there's damage within the stairway, the communal area and stuff like that. So how does that work with the team in trying to find out what that issue is, and how do you deal with, if you do find out which tenants it is, what's the process of dealing with those tenants? I'm
going to let the team start, if that's okay, because they deal with this on a day-to-day basis, and they're far better placed than I to answer. So I'm going to hand over to you team.
So I guess in the first instance, it does depend if it is decorum or housing association. So we actually do have an antisocial behaviour team in-house, so we would refer to them in the first instance if it's one of our properties, and then we can obviously work with them. We find a lot of the antisocial behaviour does link with medical as well, so they might submit a medical assessment, so we can then again work with the antisocial behaviour team, but we would need evidence of everything, which is usually where they come in. In terms of housing association, we would refer the tenant in the first instance back to the housing association, because they are the landlord, they have a duty of care. So that's kind of where we'd be placing that. If, which I've had in the past, the housing association have then contacted us and said, actually, there is antisocial behaviour in this block. In the instance that I'm thinking of, they genuinely believed it was targeted. So actually they had said to us, we would actually approve a management move. The only problem is this particular housing association doesn't have a lot of properties of decorum. So they said to us, would you consider moving these tenants within your stock? Because, we're giving you the go-ahead, basically. So that's when a CCP came in, and then we could write that to help that tenant. But normally, when it's housing association there, they kind of deal with it, or then they pass it on to us.
CCP?
Yes, what we spoke about before the complex case panel, sorry. So easy to abbreviate all the time.
So, and I guess just to follow on from that, Charlotte mentions the internal antisocial behaviour team. We've taken a decision as an organisation to align our housing revenue account antisocial behaviour team, so our tenanted ASB team, with our community safety ASB team to get the benefit of both of the dual powers that they hold, but to ensure that we can maximise, both for our tenants and wider residents, that partnership approach in tackling ASB. It does mean that sometimes we have to have some difficult conversations with our registered provider partners because it's important for us to ensure that they are utilising their own tools and powers to tackle ASB, and sometimes there is support and nudge and engagement that is needed to ensure that happens. What we want to ensure is that we are not prioritising management moves and moves for individuals and then moving a new household into an ongoing ASB situation. It's really important for us that we use the partnership engagement activity and interventions that we have to tackle the issue. Unfortunately, as many of you in the room will know, there will often be cases that are prolonged cases of antisocial behaviour, and it requires targeted approach and intervention, and often many months and sometimes years of ongoing intervention to tackle quite ingrained issues. That's why local lettings policies are really important. The team touched on that in relation to our new build schemes. When you move fresh in 33 or 58 households into a new development, it's really important that what we're doing is allocating properties to build sustainable communities. So we're allocating to a mix of households, not all households with vulnerable vulnerabilities, medical issues, or who are likely to be at home during the day. We want a mix of households who will develop a cohesive, sustainable community and obviously not contribute to onward housing issues, which can be quite burdensome for the service.
Just a second question on this, and I don't know what you can say in a public domain. What triggers management move? Well, I used to get scenarios in the past that frustrated me, and where, as a councillor, I would talk to the housing department, and they would say, "No, this is the rule," and the individual would then write to the Member of Parliament, and next thing you hear, they get a management move, and then they go around saying the Member of Parliament's amazing because they've got me a house. And it used to frustrate me that the local councillor could have achieved that decision from the council, but didn't, but the MP does. So I'm just a bit curious as to if you can say in public what triggers a management move.
I think we can give a vague example. So these are the scenarios that come in quite often through MP inquiries or councillor inquiries, but we follow the complex case panel report route. That would be a process of evidence gathering. We touched upon it in the presentation, or the officers did, where we say that we don't want to move the problem, we fix the problem. But we've got an example at the moment where there is a person who has fallen out with his neighbours, and the neighbours have fallen out with him, and it's irreconcilable. That situation is tenable. They are likely, despite all of our interventions with referrals to Mediation Hertfordshire, they're not going to rekindle that neighbourly bond that they once had. That person's crying out to us that they would like to move and remove themselves from the situation, and actually, based on all the information that we've gathered, it's a reasonable adjustment and something within our gift that we can do, transfer that person out of that property and hopefully resolve the problem for the community. And there's many examples of that type of thing that go on, but certainly our focus is to fix the problem, not move the problem. Management moves can be costly. We want to avoid that. We want to make sure that we're making sustainable communities, but there are odd occasions where we need to go that extra step.
I think also the MDT, the multidisciplinary team process, comes in is really important, and the team attend a number of those. Children's services, mental health teams are engaged. That input from those agencies is vital, and that's where they engage collectively across the service with the complex cases panel. It's understanding the severity and the scale of the impact on the residents involved, minors in the household and those around them, and then obviously making a judgment call in respect of safety. So that information that we receive from officers and partner agencies like the police is vital. So if we receive information that perhaps changes the position after information has been provided previously, it has to be reviewed every time we receive new information to support a case. So it's not uncommon for the position to change if new information comes to light. Often it's not uncommon, I think fair to say, to the team that customers may present information to the service, but they may feel more comfortable sharing different information with their elected member, with their MP or with their GP and other partner agencies to support them, and that's okay. We want to ensure that they're able to share information with the forum that they feel most comfortable, and that we have that open dialogue and information sharing arrangement with those partners to support proactive review of that application at that time.
Great, thank you. Okay, Jan?
No, yeah, mine wasn't really a question, it was just a sort of an observation, if that's okay. I've been a councillor for 10.5 years, but I'd never got involved in housing at all. I don't think I've had one single housing query until January 23. And now I feel a bit of an expert on it. So not really, but I just wanted to say that the work that goes on in the team, we started with this big problem with Gate Tower, the changes that have gone on, but it's been a massive collaboration between the housing needs team, between all the other different housing teams, with Dan and everybody, to get to where we are with Gate Tower now. And just to give an example, just last week we've had this massive problem with fly tipping. There was something like 9 separate cases in 2 days or something, but it was all coming from within the building. And the emails that were flowing around about it were including the police, the antisocial behaviour team, the housing team, this team, this team, this team. I didn't even know half the people on the list. But I just wanted to say it was outstanding. That the way that everybody suddenly just swung into action and put everything together, it was brilliant. And I just want to say how much it's appreciated, because actually it's a hard job that you guys do. It's a really hard job. When you get people like me on the phone, what are you doing about this? What are you doing about this? It's just so appreciated. So thank you. And the supported housing as well. I got involved in a supported housing case beginning of this year, and amazing, just absolutely amazing, because like other people, because I'd never been involved in that before, I really thought it was just these blocks of flats where I didn't realise that all these beautiful little nuggets, little bungalows and tucked away, and I knew they were there, I just didn't realise that they were supported housing, if that makes sense. So I just want to say a great thank you. But also to anyone who's not really been involved in it, it depends where you live, doesn't it? Some people, the moment they become a councillor, because of the nature of that area that they're living, they're going to get involved in social housing, but other areas don't get involved in it so quickly. But the team is outstanding, so thank you. That's mine.
Okay, anyone? Bola?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'm not as lucky as Councillor Jan Madden. I've been inundated with housing problems in my area, but as you rightly pointed out, I think the team, they've been brilliant. So I can't thank them enough anytime I've approached them with any issues. Now to my question. During the presentation, which I think was extremely good, thank you very much for that as well. You mentioned that our accommodation are more preferable than that of the housing association. Is it because we are cheaper in rent, or is it because our accommodation are like Hilton Hotel? What is the attraction?
The rent price, there can be a significant difference in the rent price. Housing associations, typically the rent is higher than a decorum owned property, so that's a big pull for people. Sometimes they hold out for a decorum property because of that fact when they're looking at affordability, so that's quite a big point for people.
Just to add to that point, could it also mean that because we offer lifetime tenancies and housing providers not necessarily offer lifetime tenancies as well?
So they have a short tenancy, which can stretch for exactly the same length of time as a secure tenancy, but does come, as you say, with different tenancy rights and obligations. But primarily, we tend to find, and the team feed back to me and to their heads of service, that affordability is the aspect that is stressed to them by their tenants. They would prefer to wait longer on the housing register and bid for a property in their preferred area than to bid for an affordable housing unit that has a slightly higher rent level. And that's a challenging expectation for officers to manage when you're balancing that with households who genuinely have a high housing need, and you are trying to engage with them and support them with a property that you feel will meet their needs. So that's the battle that they have on a daily basis, and can be equally challenging if you're not bidding for housing and you receive a direct offer in your household who is being allocated accommodation because you're homeless. That opportunity to bid is obviously removed in that instance, and so you may receive either or a social housing or affordable housing unit, but most commonly it is affordability, which is why from a strategic housing perspective we work really closely with our place colleagues in development of the local plan and the affordable housing SPD to engage with developers to ensure that future affordable housing units are at a level that's truly affordable for our residents. So there is detailed analysis work undertaken within our affordable housing delivery team to support that activity. So assessments of market analysis, rent levels, both in the affordable sector, but in the open market rented sector, measured against open market house prices and the average income levels within decorum, which helps us to engage and influence with place to ensure that there are caps wherever possible in the future delivery of affordable provision, so that we can keep it at a level that's affordable for residents.
Just a supplementary question. So do you then have like waiting list of housing association tenants who wants to come back to the council?
Let the team jump in if they want to add anything, but it's a common register. So households don't specify necessarily that they want DBC property versus social housing property, and stress again that in order to join the housing register you need to have a housing need. So unless a household evidences and we're able to engage with them and identify that their accommodation is unaffordable, just merely wanting to move to something cheaper wouldn't be the reason why they would be active on the register. So in that instance, we might engage with them and provide support and guidance to encourage them to look at mutual exchange if they'd like to move into an alternative property that they feel is more affordable and better suits their needs. But yes, in many instances, households will engage with the team and raise that as an area of wanting to move.
Thank you.
Right, okay, I was going to wrap it up, so some quick questions and quick answers.
This is a quickie. You read out the criteria, the points that you need to have a different size property. I wonder if you could just sort of email us or put it in the minutes so that we've got a record of that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just want to say thank you for the team. I know this session again wasn't a requirement, but I think it's an effort to make sure we all understand housing maybe from the internal point of view. And I think we see questions flying around allocations, points all the time. So I think it's a great piece of work, and I think you made it easy enough for everybody to absorb what you just shared. So thank you for the efforts and time. Thanks. Thank you very much. Well done.
Yeah, I literally just wanted to say, I didn't know this until a few months ago, and other councillors might not know, might be interested. Anybody can look at the housing register. I never knew that, and I was looking for a resident, and if you go on to Moving with Decorum, you can see all of the properties that are available. When you log in as a tenant looking for somewhere, it only comes up with the ones that you're entitled to, doesn't it? But for us, if you're interested, it shows all the properties and you can look at all of them. I never knew that until a couple of months ago, so I just thought it was worth mentioning in case anyone's interested in looking.
Just to add to that quickly, because we do get questions on this as well. Sometimes it will come up with a property, but it will say no points. But that basically means it's been direct offered.
Right.
It hasn't gone for no points. So just in case you look and think of that as a question.
But I appreciate there may be other questions that you have this evening after you've left and you've kind of thought about it further. So please do reach out to myself and the team. I'll be happy to share further responses for you. And if you feel that there is benefit in curating further sessions around specific aspects of the policy, then we're able to do that for you also.
Just one final point before you wrap up on it. Just one for Garrick's. I was going to ask that as well. So that if you could see why the points that people require for houses, but also if you could include in that what points are available on what subjects. So they get X amount of points for medical need, or they get so many points for being here for a period of time. Because a lot of contact we have as councillors is people that don't have enough points for what they actually want to bid for. So it'd be nice to have a bit more information as to what we can suggest to them to get more points if they can.
Yeah, so all the points we can have, they'll be listed on the allocations policy, but it's worth mentioning that with the points, we would assess them based on what their application is and what their need is. So it's not necessarily, if they're not being successful in what they want on the register, it doesn't necessarily mean we can increase their points to help them. It would have been assessed already. We would have identified their need and pointed them on that basis. So it's a difficult one because we understand sometimes people don't have enough points to get what they want exactly on the register, but it's not as easy as us sort of re-looking at it and increasing the points to get them there. It would be about what their housing need has been assessed as.
I think the most, sorry, I was just going to say, I think the most important thing to add to that is that when you're engaging these constituents, they may not be clear on what it is they should tell us that will be beneficial to their application. And I think at that point it's always important that more to include anything that you think may be relevant, even if you think it might not be. Tell us, because that little nugget of information might lead the team to say, actually, you've mentioned that your child is engaging with an educational psychologist at school. Let's talk about that. Maybe we need to come out and do a home visit because you've mentioned that this is a struggle and we need to understand the dynamic within the household, or you're having difficulty here. Sometimes applicants will allude to something, but they might not provide the relevant information. And so those home visits are really useful, but the information that we gain from yourselves and from other partner agencies is also really invaluable in assessing those applications.
I always struggle with the bit that I get you give the response and then they contact us as elected members going, we're not happy. And I look at this email and think, what do I do with this? You know, and unfortunately it gets batted back to you guys to go, can you look at this and give me hopefully a better answer? Do you know what I mean? But that is something we have to try and
we
work
can
on.
always look to see if there are any points that they might be missing, or perhaps something has been, they may have in an upper floor flat, that's often one that they're actually getting an extra 10 points for not having a lift, for example, if their children are under 5. So there's always points that we can look to see if they are eligible for, but it's a difficult one in the sense that if they are wanting more points to get a certain property, it's not always something that we can give, but we'll certainly assess it all.
Okay. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, just a very, very quick one when we're talking about that list. Can you confirm that the points requirement is the same across the borough, or would like a 4-bedroom flat in Warner's End require more points than a 4-bedroom flat in Tring?
I think at the moment, the bigger properties, everyone, if you've got a 4-bedroom need, you would bid on any 4-bed because potentially you could be waiting. I mean, I don't know if we've even advertised one this year. I think they're very, very few and far between. Obviously, it does depend on, like, for example, if there's like a 2-bed house in Boxmoor, that's going to get a lot of, like, I think some people, particularly if they're like maybe downsizing because they're already in a really good situation, they might be waiting for that property that they really want. So they will probably go for a bit more. And it's really hard, like even the ones that we've kind of given out today was just kind of what we think, we kind of discussed it of when we do adverts. So it can really depend on, location or again, housing association or decorum. There's always different factors to take into consideration.
The points aren't the same, are they? In reality, flats go on lower levels of points. So, in essence, the more highly desirable a property in a location is, the more that the points are driven up in any sense. So, Berkhamsted and Boxmoor are likely to be allocated on higher levels of points than other areas of the borough because of the numbers of applicants that bid for those areas and wait specifically for those areas. So, if you have an applicant with extremely high medical need, they know that they're in a better chance of getting that property that becomes available in Berkhamsted, and they will wait for that versus waiting for the property that becomes available in Gatebridge, for example. And so it kind of skews it at times.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. Right, we'll let you go now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so next one we've got another deep dive. So we've got the 25-26 Housing Performance and Tenants Voice Report deep dive. Who's leading with that?
Hannah on.
Me. Hello there. Hello.
Evening, but Hannah's going to take us through this report. She's been unable to join us in person, but she'll lead on behalf of David and the team.
Over to you, Hannah.
Thank you, and what a tough act to follow. Fantastic deep dive on the tenancy team there. So this is an item that has regularly come through to the overview and scrutiny committee. This is something that we have put forward as performance and information on a regular basis. We're just putting it into the deep dive format, given the changes that have come through for the overview and scrutiny. So I'm not going to go into it into massive amounts of detail. The report has been provided to you in the pack, alongside the narrative report, which tells of the current performance and the our work to embed our tenants' voice into the services that we deliver. We also have the narrative dashboard provided from our performance management system in phase, and that's in Appendix A. And then Appendix B is our Housemark benchmarking, which gives us an opportunity to look at a voluntary organisation's collection of housing sector compare and contrast measures. So what I would say is that the information is available to you within your pack. I do just want to highlight a brief point that I know was picked up at the chair's briefing that unfortunately I wasn't able to attend last week whilst I was on leave. There was an issue with the provision of the data from Cardo regarding damp and mould cases. So in the report itself, it is highlighted as a red, and it continues to be red even with that information that has been provided. But just for awareness, the indicator had said that the Cardo updates were not provided. You will find that actually in Appendix A, that information has then been provided in the supplementary pack, in the supporting document, Appendix A, and Dan Thurlow is also available to discuss that in more detail should you have specific questions relating to that indicator. So like I said, I'm not going to go into every area of the report in detail, but myself and other members of the housing heads of service and management team are here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Okay, open it out to colleagues. Give you a minute to find a spot.
I'll just chime in with my unwelcome comment while everybody gets through. Sorry, I know I've said it before. So while I don't want to take away anything from the key deliverables, I still find that the coverage for leaseholders seems to come through as an afterthought. So, for example, we've got the point that we've started the tenancy voice consultations, but we're holding leaseholders afterwards and separate. Having been a leaseholder myself before, obviously it does make you feel a bit kind of overlooked and not as important. So I'm afraid I can't give any great suggestions as to how to get the right balance, but sometimes when we're kind of branding things that we're only there for tenants rather than leaseholders, it will alienate some people that are very interested very invested and interested in what we're doing to look after our communities. Hopefully that's bought other people time to give their comments and questions.
I think Hannah's ready on that point, Hannah.
Yeah, I think that's a point that has been highlighted, and we do get a range of opinions relating to how leaseholders would like to be treated. There are some that, absolutely want to be, taking in that element around tenants and leaseholders, and then there are others that have said that they recognise that there are separate issues that they may particularly want to have addressed that they don't feel that they're getting when that attention is paid to the tenants. So one of the things that we have done is draft our new Get Involved strategy, which will be coming through to yourselves in due course, which one of the commitments is around a particular focus on leaseholders, and we are just working through the consultation feedback that we've had on that strategy, so that we can then present it back to you with the solidified plan of what that leaseholder offer is, and how we are going to be taking on board leaseholder views just as much as we take on tenant views as well. I think Natasha just wanted to highlight a few other points related to that.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah. I think you really useful point that you highlight, and it's an area that has been fed back to us by leaseholders. Also, at a recent engagement session that we had in the summer. I think that the aspects that I just wanted to highlight is the purpose around the tenant voice and performance report is to satisfy the regulatory requirements, and the regulator specifically asks for tenant voice data and performance data to be separated from leasehold data, hence our approach in developing our engagement strategy. We do, however, we have upcoming activity dedicated for private sector landlords and our leaseholder tenants. So we'll have a landlord forum, which will include activities available for leaseholder landlords later on this year. I think that's taking place in November, which we'll be publicising. And Oliver Jackson is leading a dedicated leaseholder services improvement plan, which is linked to our housing service redesign, and we'll be working with our engagement team to develop out a specific leaseholder engagement offer, which will look slightly different to tenants, because tenants have influenced and shaped that to align with what they would like to see, and we now need to rely on an offer that engages with our leaseholder preference and approach. So you can expect to see dedicated leaseholder forums and dedicated leaseholder Section 20 consultations in relation to Section 20 works and specific leaseholder engagement strategies.
Thank you.
Any other questions from colleagues? No? Sorry, Garrick?
On page 22, I think it was, on tenancy management, the TPAS-led neighbourhood inspection workshop was cancelled. Is this because people are very satisfied with the existing arrangements in the area, or are they just was arranged at a time which is not terribly popular for people?
Unless Hannah corrects me otherwise, I believe it was cancelled because of the number of tenants that we had signed up for that session, and we had insufficient number of tenants to progress with the session. So unfortunately, it wasn't viable for us to continue with that session.
Sure. But what's the purpose? Could I just follow that? If we're trying to do that, what's the purpose of it, so that it doesn't excite them that they want to go to attend?
So the purpose of those sessions, and we appreciate that there are often sessions that we may stand up that we feel will be meaningful for our tenants and for our leaseholders, that they may now not feel as valuable. We get a high take-up and engagement from tenants when we want to talk to them about repairs, for example, or leaseholder Section 20 works. Quite often, some of the aspects that we provide opportunities for individuals to engage with us on are specific and bespoke to those households, should they have had an issue. So if you've had an issue with antisocial behaviour within your tenancy and your locality, you may be more likely to respond to an engagement session in that respect. And so some of it is trial and error, Councillor, in respect of bringing individuals to those sessions. We've just recently held a tenant open day, as you're aware, and provides us with an opportunity to engage with our tenants to understand what it is they want to come and talk to us about. It's important that we schedule sessions that are meaningful for them, and it's important for us to acknowledge when perhaps those sessions don't align with their requirements, be that time of day, in the type of format that they would like, or within a locality that they would like. And in some cases, we don't get it quite right, and we have to learn lessons from those examples and build on that in the future. So I think in that instance, it was potentially an example of timing and the availability of tenants to attend that session, because contrasting sessions that have been scheduled have had overwhelming attendance.
Thank you.
Okay, no further questions? Okay, well, that was an interesting deep dive, wasn't it? So thank you for bringing that to us, Hannah. We'll try and find more questions for next time.
Well, I'm up next, I believe, with the TSM, so happy to field questions on those as well.
You're on the tenant satisfaction measures 24 to 25, yeah?
That's right, yes. So I was just going to share a very brief presentation. You do have the papers in the pack, but I've just put a few slides together just to provide an overview because it is quite a detailed piece of information. So hopefully you can see my screen. I can't see you if I do that like that, so bear with me 1 second. I just share that again. Okay, hopefully you can see my screen. So just to bring that down. So in terms of the tenant satisfaction measures, those of you who may be familiar with this, it's a programme that started in 23-24, which are a number of measures based around how are we doing. So that's 10 management information measures, and how do our tenants think that we are doing. So those are 12 tenant perception measures that are gathered via a survey that is sent out to tenants and for them to provide their feedback. The same questions are used throughout the country in order to ensure consistency and allows us to then compare and contrast results as we start to get them through. So all social housing landlords must collect and report on the tenant satisfaction measures, which again allows us to do that compare and contrast. In terms of key areas for noting, the management information, there are some really strong performance figures relating to our maintaining of building safety. As you can see, we have 100% across gas safety, fire safety, asbestos safety, water safety and lift safety. These indicators are where they have either improved or have stayed the same from 23-24, and the previous gas safety and asbestos safety were marginally off 100% last year, so continued good work relating to that. What I would say is that building safety is highlighted in 80% of the inspections that have been completed by the regulator. It was an area of strength that was noted in our regulatory judgment, but it is something that the regulator is continuing to keep a key focus on in light of situations that we are all aware of. So as I said, it's an area of continued focus for the regulator, and as you might expect, the median result for those indicators across that sector is 100%. We would be expecting people to be, our social landlords to be maintaining our homes to keep them safe for our residents. However, some areas are proving challenging to reach 100%. So in your pack, in one of the appendices, we have an early positioning from Housemark. So as I mentioned, this is a benchmarking organisation, and what they have highlighted is that actually the percentage of landlords that are reporting 100% on those measures is not across the board. So again, that just highlights the achievement that we have made in being able to report 100% in 24-25 across the piece. So in terms of how we've achieved that, so some real strength of scrutiny on the new gas and heating contractor. We have a compliance dashboard that is being effectively monitored and progressed. So that's a really important area of management. Effective escalation procedures and a rigorous servicing schedule and inspection programme. Moving into management information, so for keeping our properties in good repair. So in terms of the percentage of homes that do not meet the decent home standard, we have seen a reduction, so from 5.1% to in 23-24 to 2.9% in 24-25. There is the ongoing stock condition survey that is being carried out by a third party contractor that we are seeing regular results from, and we are reporting that back up to the regulator, as this was one of the areas for improvement that was noted in the regulatory judgment that we received last year. In terms of the repairs completed within timescale, some really strong performance relating to this, with 90% of 90.5%, I do need to mention the 0.5, completed within timescale, and 99.1 for emergency repairs completed within timescale. So again, some really strong performances coming through on that. So in terms of that delivery of improvement, as I've mentioned, we have the stock condition survey to bring that awareness of our current stocks and the decent home standard. And continued effective external assurance and relationship building with Cardo, and rigorous monitoring of key performance indicators and customer satisfaction, which I know the responsive repairs team in particular are highly focused on. What that has meant that even in the time since the information was gathered for the 24-25 TSMs, we are continuing to see areas of improvement relating to responsive repairs. So our first time fixes have gone up, our work in progress has gone down, the damp and mould cases have gone down, and as was referenced in the previous item in the performance report, we have continued to keep cases open in order to ensure that we are effectively closing those and that they are staying closed. And I think this one is something that really does pay testament to the work that the responsive team, repairs team have done. Of our transactional customer satisfaction with repairs has gone up from 29% this time last year to 80%, which is a really a strong measure. So really pleased to see that. In terms of the management information for effective complaint handling, we have seen a small increase of the number of stage 1 complaints per 1,000 homes. So it was 52.2% last year, and that's gone up to 57.8 total per 1,000 homes. We do need to recognise that there has been continued marketing and promotion of the Housing Ombudsman and the complaint process. I'm sure we may have seen the advertisements of how they are encouraging people to speak up and put their voices across, and complaints as part of that process. What we were pleased to see, though, is that there has been a reduction in the number of stage 2 complaints. So whilst we have seen an increase in the number of stage 1 complaints, hopefully by seeing that reduction in the stage 2 complaints, we are tackling those stage 1 complaints and preventing them from getting to that stage 2 process. And I have highlighted here just the improvement in terms of the speed of the responses. We knew that we were not performing in terms of how quickly we were getting our complaint responses out on time. So we've seen a 26% increase for stage 1 complaints completed on time, and 17% increase for stage 2 complaint responses received on time. That is still an area of focus, and is still an area that we are working on to improve those responsive rates, and the digital platform is a key part of how we're able to do that. Because it gives us that alert mechanisms of when complaints are potentially going out of date, to make sure that we are focused and delivering those responses on time where possible. So I've kind of covered in terms of how we've delivered those improvements, but we are still doing more. So just as I was referring to the digital platform, we've also been looking at the Housing Ombudsman process, how we integrate the CX feedback into the digital platform, and we are also working on how do we grade our complaint responses. So how are we assessing those against a set of criteria, and finally, how are we embedding tenants into our complaints? So we are looking at developing some scrutiny sessions for residents to come and give their feedback on how we handle our complaints. So in terms of neighbourhood management, so we have seen a reduction in the number of antisocial behaviour cases per 1,000 homes, but we have seen a small increase in the ASB hate incidents per 1,000 homes. So this was picked up in the chair's briefing, and there's some further reference. That's why we have a supplementary version 2 of the report that has been included in your pack, just to highlight and explain the hate crime definitions and how that has been put through in the TSMs. Then moving into the TSM perception survey, so this is the survey of our tenants to say how they think we are doing. So we had a really great response rate to the surveys. We contacted 9,894 tenants. We had 1,735 survey completions, which is 3 times the amount that we needed in order to demonstrate to the regulator that we were in line with the methodology that we need that governs the TSM processes. We went through CX feedback, but we did also use some sort of supplementary telephone calls as well. And again, that's explained more in the report. So in terms of the results kind of year on year, what I would say is that we have seen a small increase in the number of people who are saying that they are satisfied. We are also seeing a decrease in the average level of dissatisfaction and an increase in the average level of neutral responses. So we're hoping that's kind of maybe tipping next year into some more positive responses that we would like to see, because overall the tenant perception measures don't correlate to the management information. So the management information is looking really strong, as I've referenced, but as you can see from some of the gradings that we have been given in terms of the percentages, that our tenants are not as satisfied as we would hope them to be. However, we have seen some real strong improvements relating to the repairs service, so that is something that we should be noting. And the report also notices that in other areas as well. We do have the Housemark comparisons. What I would say with that is that Housemark is only as good as the information that was available to them. So it was an early bird, kind of an early look at the TSM results. The RSH will be providing an overview of all of the results across the country, which will allow us to do that comparison and in more detail. We are also talking to our Herts local neighbours around their TSMs and kind of feeding that back. And what's interesting is just seeing we're doing better than them in our management information, which is really positive to see. So this is just to give you a flavour of one of the things that we are doing for 25-26 for the TSM measures. We are now taking the TSMs on a monthly basis. So we are changing it to sending out the surveys on the anniversary of their tenancy. That means that we are in the position where we are generating a monthly report on the tenant perception surveys. What you can see here is the green indicators of where we are doing better on the 24-25 performance, and the red indicators are where we're not doing as well as 24-25. What I would say is that we're obviously only a small portion of the way into the year, and we will obviously be continuing to monitor this, but it gives us a good basis and something that we can then work on. How do we bring our tenants' perceptions up to where we would hopefully reflect the management information to be? So the results that are being presented to you tonight and within the report have already been submitted to the regulator. There is a mandatory deadline in June that we have to submit all of the information to the regulator, and then it's obviously programmed to yourselves tonight, and then will come through to Cabinet as well for information, as well as being published on our website and highlighted in communications for tenants. We are also going to be holding our first Spotlight on Housing session. That will be an online session encouraging tenants to take part, and they will be able to attend on the 8th of October, where we will be presenting the TSM information to them and talking to them about what we're planning to do that will hopefully continue to improve services for this forthcoming year. And as I mentioned, the invites are now being sent out on a tenancy anniversary. We're developing the dashboard, and we are continuing to work on how do we improve those TSMs for 25-26. All other information is available in the pack, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Hannah. Open up to the floor. Any questions?
I'll go first again if nobody's ready to jump in. Okay, thanks for the presentation, Hannah. And I think I should kick off by saying congratulations to you, to the team, to Simi, everybody. These are some fantastic numbers, the kind of numbers that Donald Trump would dream of. I would sort of just, your comments on the tenant's perception, I feel that you may be selling yourself short on there with expectations. It may be worth trying to internally distinguish between the opinions that have been shared by tenants that have, I'll categorise it as having a significant interaction with the council in the last 18 months compared to those that haven't. Because what we have to remember is, sorry, I'm going to be unpolitical saying it, there were some very strong negative connotations with Osborne's in the immediate pre-pandemic and pandemic period. Changing those opinions is a long road, and whilst we might be doing some absolutely great things in the current year, some of those tenants won't see or have an impact on them. Some of them kind of will, and it might be better, but they're still very heavily affected by the negative view that's been built up in previous years. So obviously we want to report these numbers and we want them to be as objective as possible, so I think you're doing the right thing. But I think almost we need to look at the focus between those people that we've done something with, whether that is a repair or something else on that, since the Cardo relaunch and since a lot of these measures have come in, compared with those who are just giving a feedback based on the length of their tenancy.
I think that's a really, a really good point, and we do appreciate it's going to be a journey, and you know, we are recognising that we're not going to see those changes in perceptions overnight, but we do want to have a plan of how do we communicate those positives and continue to highlight those with the expectation that we will see a resulting eventual increase in tenant perception through that work.
Thank you.
Any other colleagues? No? Ola, off you go.
Just a quick one. On the ASB point, you said the hate crime has gone up. Could it be because there's now a wider definition of the word hate? Where in actual fact it might not have gone up, but because there's now a wider definition of it, is that the reason why it's gone up in your chart?
Sorry, excuse me.
Happy to take that question. So possibly, Councillor, but we do liaise proactively with police to ensure that our data is cross-checked with the information that they have. So statistically speaking, the data does indicate that there has been a rise in hate crime reporting and in crimes within the borough. as a result, what we have done is stood up a decorum forum as a third-party hate crime reporting centre. So we have gone through that process of administration, training our staff, engaging with the police through the Community Safety Partnership. We will very, very shortly launch the forum as a hate crime reporting centre so that we can actively encourage our residents to engage and report concerns to us so that we're able to use that information and insight to engage with our Community Safety Partnership colleagues to look at other interventions to deter hate and other associated activity. But unfortunately the data does strongly indicate that there has been a rise.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Hannah. That's it, I think. Thank you for your time.
Thanks all.
Okay, moving on. Right, agenda 12, HMO licensing policy and fee structure. We're handing over to...
Yes, I'm Rebecca Clark. I'm the Private Sector Housing Manager here at Decorum, and I'm here to present the Private Sector Housing Multiple Occupation, Licensing Policy and Fee Review. And so a report and a number of appendices were circulated that includes our current and proposed HMO licensing policy and fee structure. And I'm here to seek approval of the new policy and the new fee model. So I'll take the paper as read and give you a brief overview of the main changes and impacts, and then take any questions. And so the main policy changes. The first one is a reduced licence term. So currently we only issue a 5-year policy, a 5-year licence when we're issuing HMO licences, but the new policy will support 2 options. So one being a 5-year and the other being a 1-year. And this gives the council more leverage to drive up compliance where we have non-compliance within the HMO sector. And so the licence reduction will be signed off by senior officers and evidence-based to ensure that it's legally defensible. And the policy sets out clearer expectations. It strengthens the alignment with our current policy, so that's our enforcement policy and our civil penalty policy. And it also aligns into what the Renters' Rights Bill, once it becomes an act, will require of us as a team. And so the proposed fee, the new model is based on cost recovery. And so this covers admin, compliance and enforcement of the mandatory licensing scheme. And it includes some proportionate overheads, which include IT systems, HR, legal and officer training in regard to HMOs. And so the new fee is set for a 5-year licence to be £1,546, and that's separated into 2 parts. So we've got part 1 and a part 2. And so the current fee is £1,391, again broken down into 2 parts. Now this Okay, so the change in fee model will just ensure that the landlords bear the cost of the mandatory licensing scheme, and these costs aren't passed on to our general fund or to our taxpayers. And so within the report there is a transparent breakdown of both fees, as well as a benchmarking exercise across Hertfordshire but also across London. And so another key change to the fee is the removal of the 2- and 4-year inspections within the fee breakdown. So our current fee charges for 3 inspections during the lifetime of the licence, and that's deemed as excessive, and where we have going to be introducing a 1-year licence. So if there are concerns over a HMO and a need to revisit, we shouldn't be issuing a 5-year licence, we should be issuing a 1-year licence, and therefore every time that property is licensed, a revisit will be carried out. Okay, so there's 2 implications. One is financial, and so this is in that a positive light in that the service will remain self-funding, and that there's closer alignment in the new fee structure to the true cost of the regulation and the rollout of the mandatory licensing scheme, and especially in regard to high-risk HMOs. And so there's also legal risk, and that's in that where we will be issuing 1-year licences, there's the increased risk that we'll face appeal to the Residential Property Tribunal. But the way the process will be is with senior officer sign-off, and it will be evidence-based, so that will alleviate any risks with going to appeal, in that we will have the evidence to demonstrate why we've reduced that licence. And so to conclude, there's various recommendations within the report, but we recommend option 3, as this delivers a coherent, legally robust framework that balances financial sustainability with improved regulatory flexibility and aligning with our corporate priorities. But I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Okay, open up to the floor. Ed?
Just for more sort of context, the difference between 5-year and 1-year licensing. You mentioned that if you have concerns, 1-year license, not 5, right?
Yeah.
Just give an example of what would like completely fail, what would get a 1-year, and what would get a 5-year.
Okay, so just, there's a few examples that I could give. So some HMOs require planning permission, so if there's more than 6 people in there, so if we were licensing a property that needed planning permission and didn't have it, then we would issue a 1-year licence. You know, if there was serious risk, if we identified a category 1 hazard, risk within the property that was kind of left, then we would be looking to do a 1-year licence. If they were behind in their council tax payments, I couldn't demonstrate a reason why, then we would issue a 1-year licence. Now, when we come forward that year and we're looking at relicensing, if that landlord has resolved whatever the issue is, then there will be no reason why they wouldn't get a 5-year licence. And so it's really in there to drive up compliance and make sure they're complying with legislation, you know, across the council, not just in regard to the condition of the property.
So if like the property doesn't, if someone comes to you for like, it's unlikely, but if they come to you to the council and they don't have a fire risk assessment, would that get a 1-year, or would that just not get a licence at that point?
That's kind of variable. I mean, we definitely could consider, you know, if it was a new HMO and there wasn't people in there and, you know, they were going through the licensing process and applying, then, you know, there's that flexibility that they'd be able to do that. But if there was no fire risk assessment in place and they hadn't supplied that, we probably wouldn't be progressing with that actual licence application. They would need to get that before we can kind of move forward. And if they hadn't had a risk assessment and they hadn't identified that there is a fire risk within that property, and there was, then that could be deemed as category 1 hazard, and then on the back of that we can issue a 1-year licence.
Rick?
Hi. Thanks for the report. Apologies, this is possibly a political question, so it may go on to Simi. But my main concern about the sort of push towards the 1-year licensing is that I think it almost incentivises landlords to not license as an HMO. And I've got 2 sort of reasons for that. The first is that if the property is vacant at a time, they're very unlikely to relicense it if they're only licensing it at a sort of 1 year at a time until they get somebody into the property, which means they don't have the same obligation to keep it up to a standard when a tenant isn't there. And the other thing is because of the current media environment and the fact that HMO is being used as a very negative word, a lot of people won't want their property to be associated with an HMO licence if possible. So I am worried about a possible side that somebody that they may choose that rather than having an HMO, that they'll try to lease it as a normal home and sort of represent it as a household going in. So it's almost, if our political objective is to encourage people to use their properties to house a single household rather than an HMO, I think that the push towards a 1-year licence will kind of assist that. I'm not expecting that is probably what we want to do. I don't think it's going to be an issue when people have sort of multiple tenants in the property at the time. But I think the second that property is empty, there is no incentive for somebody to keep it licensed if it is on a very short licence, i.e. a year.
So, you know, opting for a 1-year licence isn't really going to be a decision that a landlord would make. They wouldn't be able to make an application just for a 1-year licence. You know, they have to make the application for 5-year, and then we would determine as to whether they're going to get a 1-year or 5-year. Now, if the landlord wants to make a choice that they don't want to licence that property, there isn't really kind of any incentive that we can put in place to stop them going into a single family dwelling. If they are operating an unlicensed HMO, then we have many enforcement powers, including prosecution and civil penalties, which are currently up to £30,000 per offence. And once the renters' rights come in, that will go up to £40,000. So it's, that's kind of not an incentive to licence, but that's, a deterrent not to licence.
Well, it's an incentive to have a licence once a tenant is in. But my point is that if I was given a 5-year licence to have this as an HMO property, then I would keep it as an HMO property for that 5 years. What I'm saying is that if I was given a 1-year licence, at the end of that year, I would then make a choice going, do I want to keep doing this? And obviously that's going to be very much affected by A, is my property full? And B, did my neighbours look at the licence and see that this property is licensed in HMO, and are they sort of graffitiing it and treating it badly, which, I'm not aware of that happening anywhere in Dacorum, but obviously it is happening a lot in the rest of the country. So my concern is, are we incentivising the things that we as a council want to incentivise? I'm almost thinking a short licence makes it less likely that somebody is going to comply.
So if I can come in there, Councillor, thank you for your question, and I can understand the points that you're raising. The priority for us is around resident safety, and the want and intent to align with the benchmark position that Rebecca has led with our Hearts and Beds authorities, just to ensure that we prioritise resident safety. It is not incumbent upon us to issue a 5-year licence if there are concerns around how the landlord manages and maintains that property. And so the intent is not to disincentivise, but to issue that 1-year licence with the aim to build a rapport, proactively engage with the landlord. And in some cases, I think fair to say, Rebecca, that often we're more likely to be issuing 1-year licences for landlords who are less educated, maybe a first-time landlord, not necessarily willfully not keeping a property up to standard, but need to engage with the service to develop an understanding of the requirements that they need to keep their home into. And so for us, is around ensuring that we, first and foremost, prioritising resident safety and ensuring that what we're not doing is delivering a licensing service that could directly impact on other services within the organisation and directly contribute and conflate things like general fund spend in relation to temporary accommodation and homelessness. That being said, any policy decision that we make needs to be continually reviewed, and we continue to engage with our residents and with landlords to understand whether there are any unintended consequences of a decision, and we hold annual landlord forums to understand what factors within the market, be that policy decisions or legislative decisions, that might impact on their decision to move away from the way they currently utilise their homes. Our personal view from the engagement that has been undertaken is that this is a consistent position that is being moved to from a number of other local authorities, primarily from a resident safety perspective, but also to ensure that we are keeping a close monitoring eye on the standard of those properties so that we can intervene earlier rather than at that 5-year licence point. At the current time, if we have a 5-year licence we issue, we go back and inspect at intervals. It could be then some time before we identify that there are issues. That 1-year point gives us the opportunity to intervene and engage with the landlord early and provide them with support to bring their property up to speed. That being said, there will be many other examples of where landlords may choose to change their approach and circumvent whether to licence their property or not, whether to risk assess their property or not, and that's where we have the proactive arrangements in place with the team, working in partnership with organisations like the police, trading standards and modern slavery to identify landlords and properties that are acting below that safety net, and that happens unfortunately regularly in Dacorum, and we've had to execute 2 warrants just this week on high profile premises in Dacorum where landlords are doing exactly that. So there will always be those landlords that choose not to licence and may use to operate their property as a single property dwelling or operate as an unlicensed HMO, and that will require enforcement action from the team.
Yeah, so can I just add as well that at the moment with a 5-year licence, if we have concerns over a number of areas of the licence. So it might be the financial arrangements, property conditions, the management structure. So our only options at the moment are, you know, we can refuse a licence or we can issue a 5-year licence. And so the 1-year licence gives us that middle ground. So where, you know, in some situations we may be looking to refuse that licence, but actually the 1-year licence gives us time to work with that landlord, get the property up to standard, get them compliant, and then they can move on to that 5-year rather than just refusing. Because that, you know, that kind of leaves you in a bit of a no man's land, because they can't actually serve Section 21s on an unlicensed HMO, and so then they can't evict the tenants, but then they can't actually license it either because we've refused that.
Thank you. I think as long as we are monitoring it for unintended consequences, then that's fine. Obviously, I can't say that this is going to happen. I'm just sort of stating that there are some bits where I'm worried that that may be a consequence, but it would be it would only be appropriate to somebody that was not successfully letting out their tenancy to an HMO. It would only be, you know, they'd only be considering that if they were struggling to have the occupancy that they were expecting. But thanks for listening to my concern.
Anything else from colleagues? Gareth?
Thanks. Under the section on licence holder, I thought I'd just explore this particular issue because I think we've got a bit of a lacuna. In clause 14.6, we're talking about a representative of the licence holder, whereas in 14.8, we've got a phrase here about a trust, and the licence holder will be a trustee who will be legally liable for undertaking the formalities relating to the trust arrangements. That appears to be missing out of 14.6. You can have a representative who's effectively a front person, whereas the licence holder could be somebody somewhere remote who will never ever get contacted, etc. So the tenants are not in direct contact with the licence holder, as it were.
So yeah, I mean, there isn't actually a requirement for the tenants to be in direct contact with the licence holder itself. The licence holder will have, you know, they'll be duty bound by the licence conditions. They're not necessarily the property manager. The property manager will also be named on the licence, and they're the ones that will be expected to be having that direct contact.
Right. So the agent, in fact, would hold the responsibility.
It can be an agent.
For discharging all the responsibilities of managing the property.
Ultimately, yes, it will be in relation to whatever the management arrangement is between the licence holder and the property manager, but the licence holder will bear the responsibility of the licence conditions and is also the ultimate responsible party.
Right. Well, whereas in your policy here, you say it's legally liable for the undertaking of formalities. That doesn't appear to be well defined in 14.6.
Okay, I'll take that comment back if that's okay and review that.
Okay, right, thank you, colleagues. So on page 123, it gives the options, and there's the recommendation is to go for option 3, which is a full proposal. Is the committee happy to go with that recommendation? That was audible. Oh, there we go. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Okay, thank you. That's good, Rebecca. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks all.